Never underestimate God's ability to keep his covenant with you and to release the dimension of what I call prophetic preservation. I've said Sunday that there is preservation in your situation, and we were looking at David and his 600 men in 1 Samuel chapter 30. I want to step back today and just kind of take a real quick big picture look at God's ability to keep covenant. Now, what I mean by preservation is God doesn't keep you from something, he keeps you through it. He covers you through it. Now, if you've been following this ministry, you're part of our church family, you know this very well. But for those of you who are maybe newer, or maybe you're catching this channel for the first time, let me just drop this on you real quick as it relates to how God creates. How God creates, the creative process of any journey of faith, destiny, dream, purpose, identity, God doing what he said he would do. It always begins with God speaking. Conversations birth new seasons. Conversations create new beginnings. And one of the amazing things that you discover about the Lord in the scriptures is that when God wants to create, he speaks. So both with the natural world in Genesis chapter 1, when God wants the world to appear, to come into existence, for his will to be manifest in time and space, he speaks a word, let there be. Likewise, when God wants to create something in our lives, he will speak, and it's that speaking that births or launches the new beginning. We see this with Abraham in Genesis 12. God shows up and speaks to him. There's a pattern in how God works. He's consistent in how he keeps covenant with his people. And here's the pattern. God has a way of finding us where we are and engaging us where we are and initiating new beginnings by initiating a conversation. And when God speaks, he releases a prophetic covenant that is assigned to that word to keep us through every step, season, phase, and shift of our journey until the thing God speaks comes to pass. So no doubt you're connected to this church, you're connected to this ministry because there is symmetry, there is prophetic DNA that is similar to your journey that is unique in how God does what he does by birthing new beginnings by speaking. So you're watching this right now because you've got a covenant with God. Not a covenant that you made with him, but a covenant that he made with you. So I'm talking to people today who are somewhere along the way. You're somewhere in the journey from speaking or beginning through becoming, stepping into actually manifesting what God said. You've been following us in the latest teaching series. You know, we've been talking mostly about Abraham. 24 years from the time God initially speaks until Isaac is born. That is, or 24 years rather, until God shows up and says a year from now, you're going to see the full expression of my promise. So for 25 years, Abraham and Sarah journey under a covenant from God, umbrellaed beneath prophetic preservation. And God comes to Abraham at the end of that 24th year and says, in one more year, I'm going to show up and do what I said. Now, here's the unique thing about that. Their journey wasn't easy. There were a lot of moves. There were a lot of shifts. There were a lot of changes. Time came and gone. You see, there are 4 T's to prophetic preservation, or phases, things that God's covenant prophetically keeps us through while we're in that process of walking out that word that's gone forth over our lives. They are time, trouble, temptation, and transition. Somewhere in your journey from God speaking to you and birthing your destiny or launching you in the direction of the new beginning he's moving you into. When you carry a covenant from God in your life and over your life, there is a preservation dimension that God himself commands. The prophetic word the assignment, the direction, the promise contains preservation, and it keeps you through time. Abraham is getting older. He starts at 75 when his journey begins. He's 99 when God shows up and says, a year from now, I'm going to show up and fulfill my promise to you. And then a year later, he's now 100. So from 75 to 99, and then from 99 to 100. Now here he is, a quarter of a century later. God's covenant kept him. He's the beneficiary, the recipient of prophetic preservation through the time he was moving through. You see, I've learned something in my own journey. I've learned something in the scriptures, and I've learned something in working with and walking with God's people through their seasons and journeys to prophetic fulfillment. And that thing is this: time has a way of testing us. Time has a way of seeming sometimes like it's getting away from us. But God said, I will redeem the years that the locusts have eaten. What time has taken from you, though you can't get time back, I'm prophetically preserving you through the time you think you're losing, so that I can do more in one moment. I'll do more in one season. I'll do more in one era of restoration in your life than will more than make up for all of the seeming lost years. You see, time can take a toll on us, but it changes nothing when we're covered by a covenant of prophetic preservation. So the first T is time. The second is trouble. You don't need me to tell you today that when you're on the journey of faith, there are seasons where we go through troubled times, troubled waters, troubled scenarios. So the trouble that Abraham and Sarah went through did not change the promise of Isaac. It didn't undo what God said, because when God speaks a word over us and makes a covenant with us, there is a preservation dimension in the promise itself. And it is that preservation dimension, it's prophetic preservation, that's keeping you not only through time, but through the trouble. The third T is temptation. Now, temptation means to pressure or test. It can be temptation to sin. It can be temptation to doubt. It can be temptation to quit. It can be temptation meaning you're pressured to stop striving for what God awakened faith and vision in you to pursue. Hebrews 11:6 says that God rewards those who pursue Him as a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle of pursuit. It's not just seeking Him occasionally, but you've surrendered to the prophetic destiny that God has activated upon your life, and you've surrendered to the covenant. You've said yes to Him. And there is a reward that is going to come upon your life. That part of that reward is prophetic preservation. There is, as I said Sunday, preservation in your situation. So the pressure you're under doesn't change God's prophetic dimension, His preservation dimension over your life. So time, trouble, temptation, and finally transition. When you look at Abraham and Sarah's journey for that 25 years before Isaac's finally born, they moved a lot. They went through some things. They lived on the edge at times, the edge of danger, the edge of uncertainty, the edge of fear. And all the while, their situation physically, she's never been able to conceive. Now he's at a place where his body is no longer functioning like he did when he was a younger man. In other words, they've been through some transition. Transition is not just external change, it's the toll that change takes on your soul. Transition is the journey that you take in your inner being, your heart, your mind, your emotions, your thoughts, your feelings, your moods, your perceptions, your perspectives. You see, time, trouble, and temptation are all parts of the process, but so is transition. And what transition ultimately means is I've been through some things that were beyond my control, and I've processed them in an inner place, inside me, and I'm just not sure. You see, here's the thing I want to leave with you today. The ability of God to complete and fulfill His promises and His prophetic covenants with you are not dependent upon your ability. That's why time, trouble, temptation, and transition can't change what God said. It can't undo the covenant. God is so good. He's so strong, and He's so eternally committed to the things He has promised your life and the prophetic journey of destiny and purpose and meaning and fulfillment and joy and leadership or service or giving your life away to others in whatever sphere God's called and gifted you to do that. It's His ability to keep you, not your ability to hold on to Him. It's His ability to keep His promise. You see, I mentioned earlier as we started this conversation about the pattern. And along with the pattern of prophetic preservation is also the pattern of God showing up and initiating the journey. You see, Paul put it this way: He who began a good work in you will complete it. He's the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. He calls those things that are not as though they were. He declares the end from the beginning. So by the time He initiates the journey of prophetic preservation, He's already kept you through time, trouble, temptation, and transition. He showed up when Abraham wasn't looking, because Abraham had a lifestyle of relentlessly pursuing the one who rewards those who walk with Him through time, trouble, transition, and temptation by faith and allowing God to do His part. You see, your responsibility is to keep moving. You don't have to be perfect. God doesn't want you to have answers. He doesn't need you to make it happen. He just needs you to pursue. And as you do, He's going to show up and you're going to bump into Him in a way where He proves to you that the God who launched your destiny, who gave you that dream, and who released that promise initiating your journey, is going to meet you in a moment that you're not even expecting, because you dared to build a lifestyle of relentlessly pursuing Him. And you are the beneficiary of prophetic preservation. And the God who said it to you is the God who is going to show up and do exactly what He said. I want you to be encouraged today, and also stop trying to make things happen that only He can make happen. If He's God enough to say it, He's God enough to do it, and He's going to do it in your life.